But Akers he's got a big leg.
Drills it, and it's off the crossbar and through. Wide open, and flicked into the end zone by Jerome Simpson. Oh, goodness.
And Westbrook stops at the 1 and goes down to a knee. Why would he do that? That's crazy.
All right, the 2016 MHA season is finally in the books. We are celebrating a brand new champion, a first-time champion, and we'll have that owner here on the show with us. I'm Eric Lansing, here to help navigate the final podcast of the 15th season of the Mile High Affiliates. Joining me is the usual suspects of Mikey Renault and Todd Diamond. Aaron Renault also hanging around here as well, and we will talk so much. There's so much to talk about on this show. I mean, it's a lot of season, a lot of ups and downs, so lot to get here, and of course, our special guest, the new champion, Mr. Ryan Castro. Congratulations. How's it feel?
Thank you. It feels great. It's been a long time coming, a long-ass time coming.
Since the first year coming.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of people that can boast that that they've been around since the beginning, and then for you to finally get one, I think we're all excited for you. More than we were excited for Mikey getting his fourth.
Well, I appreciate that everybody wanted me to win except Mikey. But at the same time,
Mikey.
except though, he was actually the first person to text me congrats after it went down, though. So, he handled that like a champion.
It was an epic final.
It was
absolutely.
And we'll talk about that. A lot to talk about. We'll talk to you. We'll talk about the championship matchup. We'll kind of go through kind of how it all went down here in just a couple minutes. So what is coming up on the show? As I mentioned, we'll relive Week 16. We'll also talk about the regular season, some of the playoffs, and the high moments, the low moments. We'll give you kind of our most disappointing players, the surprise players, and even the most valuable players. And we'll also talk about we'll allow the owners to vent about who didn't have a great season, which pretty much is the rest of us here. Maybe more me and Todd than the rest of the folks in this building. Yeah. So we'll be bitching more than probably they do. So let's Todd, how are you doing? Season's over. Are you happy that it's over? Happy like I am that we can talk about something else?
Definitely. I mean, obviously fantasy football is still fun regardless, but obviously it does suck when your team just takes a big crap and says, you know what? It's not going to be it's not going to be your year. So just go through it, and you kind of learn from it. That's all you can do from fantasy. You learn from it.
So in the email, I told you guys to give me something about anything in fantasy football. Obviously, we want to keep the most valuable players, the least valuable players. That's stuff we're going to talk about later in the show. But did something jump out this year to you about fantasy? Anything? Anything comes to mind?
I think just all the boom, all the bust players and injuries that kind of clouded over fantasy football this year. I mean, you had a lot of players had a lot of expectations, and it just, players you'd think, don't get hurt a lot, they got hurt. So I think that was the big thing that stuck out, was just so many injuries and so many bust players right off the bat. Maybe in maybe the first 5-6 games, you could say they just weren't, thinking, okay, they'll get over the skid, and nope. It was they went down with their sinking ship.
Mikey, how are you doing?
I'm doing fine. If there was one thing that I have to say about this fantasy season, it's probably the most improbable run to a championship I think I've ever seen for a team.
Yeah, for sure. Both teams that got into the championship had losing records, which be part of the MHA trivia, which should be interesting, and we'll see if any of you guys can come up with the answer. But we'll talk about that here after we talk about the championship. But for sure. I mean, Ryan, and we'll talk about his trip to the playoffs. But man, one thing, all it took for one thing for me to win, really, to knock you out of the playoffs didn't happen. Anybody else, Kevin could win and knock you out, but
the scenarios, and I texted Ryan about this 3 weeks from the time the playoffs started, just a list of things that had to happen.
Yeah.
And it just seemed like it was almost impossible, for half of the things to happen. But you could kind of go down a checklist week by week by week. And it's funny, things just kept happening. Every single thing that needed to happen happened, which was just crazy.
It's fun.
Well,
it must have been amazing for you to be like, oh, Eric lost again, Kevin lost again.
Todd came through with a big win.
That's right. Yep, Todd winning incredible.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, the season was very frustrating for me up until the playoffs because it's one of those things. I mean, if you have a good team, and I knew I had a good team. I was putting up points, and I kept telling my son, and I was like, every week, I was just like, man, this is some bullshit. I'm like second or third in points, but I've got this losing record.
Yeah.
And even Mikey was like, hey, that's what's keeping you alive, and so thank God for, that's kind of what kept me alive because if you would have told me, hey, Ryan, you're going to be 5-7-1 the year you win the championship, I'd have been like, yeah, right. You know, so,
anybody 5-7-1.
Yeah, but I'll take it. In the end, it's like he kept telling me, because I was getting irritated, and Mikey just said, all you gotta do is get in, man. And he was right because I burned through the playoffs, so it was pretty.
Try
good.
not to boast too much about Mikey being right. This is your championship. You talk about how you were great, not that Mikey.
The way I saw it is like the fantasy gods got it right. You almost had to go through, all that pain and suffering at the beginning. It makes it more worth it for you now.
Yeah,
I agree with that.
Yeah, me too.
It's a great story. So let's talk about the championship game. We talked about the two losing teams coming in, pulling off huge upsets in the semifinals. You beat Aaron, who came in with the number 1 seed, Kilgore Trout, the number 2 seed. So you guys overcame those odds to get to the championship match. So just give me some of your thoughts, both of you, heading into how did you feel going into the championship weekend? Did you feel good? Were you worried about injuries? Or what were some of the thoughts you were going through your minds?
Well, I think the first thing that obviously, I have a lot of respect for Aaron's team. They were kicking everybody's ass all year long. And, when we had the regular season matchup, that was to me a heartbreaker because, I was like, I'm about to put another L in this column. And I think I lost by like 1 point. Yep. 1 point. 1 point thanks to Aaron Rodgers. And then, when we had the playoff game, obviously I'm not going to lie. I'm glad his team, they did not, perform the way I expected them to. I definitely didn't expect him to have such a low total once it was all over. And not that my total was great that game either, but, it was enough to get it done. But, and I just wanted to make sure I made all the right decisions. The one thing that rang through my mind that round and the round against Mikey was what we talked about at the beginning was when that year when I decided to be Captain Gamble and, not, play Aaron Rodgers. And I was like, no matter what, that's the only reason I played Brandon Cooks in that last game was because I was just like, fuck it, start your studs. And granted, he didn't do shit after the week before when I did sit his punk ass and he got like 28 points after he hasn't done anything for me all season long, basically. But, I was just like, you know what happens, happens. But, I could say nervous was probably when I was playing Aaron. I was kind of nervous, so.
Mike, how did you feel going into the championship match?
Confident but nervous. Like I felt like I knew I had to get to a certain point total, and so all week I was trying to figure out how was I going to get there. I went back and forth with the quarterback I was going to use. I didn't know what I was going to do with my flex. I didn't know what I was going to do with my defense. And it just kind of came down to the wire right before lock before I finally settled on a lineup that I thought was going to give me a decent enough shot to win. And it almost did.
It was close. It was definitely close. Things started off well for Ryan. He got 27 points from Jay Ajayi. He was telling us off the air that you weren't even sure because he was kind of faltering down the end of the season, and he came through with 27 points. A lot of those came in that very final drive. He broke off a big run at the end to kind of secure things for Miami as well. LaShawn McCoy, you mentioned us, your MVP of the season.
Absolutely.
Which, he was incredible during the playoff run for you. And so you had a 122-68 lead heading into the afternoon games, if I did my math right. And Ryan, you still had Brandon Cooks, Antonio Brown, Latavius Murray. Mike, you still had Jameis Winston, Mike Evans, Frank Gore, Cameron Brate, and Dallas's defense. So were you nervous heading into the afternoon games? Did you feel good in that position?
I felt good until I was actually watching that Raiders game, and I was actually texting Mikey. I was like, what the hell? I was like, fucking this hot hand bullshit, giving the ball to Washington instead of – I was like, those were supposed to be Latavius Murray's touchdowns. Because honestly, if they would have been his, then it probably wouldn't have came down to the wire, which is what made it more exciting, but more nerve-wracking at the same time.
Yeah, we were at the grocery store, and I looked at my phone and says, why does Dwayne Washington have 2 22-yard rushing touchdowns here in the third quarter? This is not working out. Mikey, how did you feel going into the afternoon games? Because you had that decision between Kirk Cousins and Jameis Winston, and you're like, All right, you had Jameis Winston over Kirk Cousins.
Right, and to defend that decision, I mean, I liked the matchup that Mike Evans had. I liked the matchup that Cameron Brate had. And so I just figured that, with both of them playing, I might as well have exposure to the quarterback throwing them the ball. And each one of them did have a touchdown. The reason that I went with Winston over Cousins was not only that, but Cousins' matchup against the Bears were kind of an underrated pass defense. And if you look at what Cousins did, he only had 18 completions against him for like 270 and 1 touchdown. The statistic that I couldn't predict is that Cousins ran for 2 touchdowns.
Right.
How am I supposed to know that?
No.
So,
that's a tough one to have to gauge.
Well, thank God he didn't, because that gave him the points he needed.
That's right.
Yeah, and with Brate getting hurt early in that third quarter, that kind of really
he ended
hurt
up with
me
7
too.
points.
Yeah.
So after Sunday was over, the one thing that you said was, I'll be okay if Antonio Brown doesn't get a touchdown. And at the very last moment, I didn't get to watch the game. I was with my family. But
my God.
with 9 seconds left,
It was looking so good.
it was almost like Ryan was pushing Antonio Brown into the end zone. The way he kind of had to I was like, Ryan's helping with his mind right now.
I was wondering what Ryan was thinking because at halftime, Antonio Brown had 1 point.
Yeah, I was pretty heated, actually. I was just like, I think I had texted you, too, and you were like, well, I like where he's at. And I was like, of course you do. But I was like, thank God, because the way it looked is kind of, I remember, I think it was can't remember which commentator said it, but they said somebody looks like they had a conversation with Ben Roethlisberger at halftime, because then you could tell he was just trying to get it to Brown as much as he could, and that kind of helped get those stats up. But I even remember I texted him. I was like, I need a touchdown. I need a damn touchdown. And it was looking like it wasn't going to happen until that final drive. And then when he reached over, I was just like, yelling him on. I was like, yeah, Brown, get it. What can Brown do for you? So I was like.
I knew I was in trouble. The Steelers, they'd scored 2 touchdowns in a row with Le'Veon Bell, and they had a lead, 27-24, something like that. And so on this drive where the Ravens were going down, I just kept thinking, I'm like, man, if the Ravens score, I'm screwed. So I need Pittsburgh to stop them, because it's just going to make Pittsburgh pass every play. He was going to rack up points, and sure enough, that's exactly what happened. That last drive Pittsburgh had, I think Brown, ended up with like 12 points on that drive.
Wow,
including touchdown.
That is incredible. So you go in. So you have the lead. Was it a 16-point lead? Is that right?
Yep.
And you had Dallas's D going into Monday, and I got to experience that game with you as it went along. And I guess give me some of your thoughts as that game's going along. I know you said you thought you needed a touchdown from him, and at the end of the day, you definitely needed to. But I mean, that's just kind of the way fantasy football goes, I guess, at the very end of it all.
Yeah, to be honest, the defense did what I thought they probably could, do. They ended up with 11 points, which
was better than the other option you were thinking about.
Right. There wasn't a lot of good options out there. It wasn't like the previous week when Miami was out there against anybody against the Jets. Fortunately for Ryan, he had the defense playing against the Jets this time.
I sure did.
17 points.
I knew I needed that, either a special teams or a defensive touchdown. And Dallas had a couple opportunities with dropped interceptions, and it just didn't fall my way. But, I scored 150 points, which I was – kind of around that number I thought I needed to be at, and he did better. So, I can't be mad at that.
So, was it nerve-wracking? What's going through your mind as you're watching this game?
Oh, the final one. At first, I was like, yes, because Lions came out roaring. No pun intended.
Points,
but
21 points in the first quarter or something like that.
Yeah, I remember I told Ryan, I was like, man, it looks like I got this shit. But then things started turning a little bit. And then I was getting a little bit nervous towards the end of the game. I was like, because I said the same thing that you told me he was saying off the air. I was like, man, if these fools get a pick six, I was like, I'm done.
Yeah.
I was like, and thank God that didn't happen.
It did not. And winning your first championship and looking back on the draft and Antonio Brown falling to you. I mean, there's so many different factors, but I mean, that was the first thing that jumped out to me was if Venti would have picked. Antonio Brown like it should have been. It would kind of been a different season, but just to get Antonio Brown and he did exactly what what he said he would do. He's going to go out and get you those points. He's that type of player, and he got you a championship.
Absolutely.
And so to me, I just think that rears. I mean, poor Robbie. I know he went with Andrew Peterson. He got hurt, whatever. But I mean, that's why you draft Antonio Brown right there. Because he'll scream at his quarterback, and his quarterback like, all right, I got you. I'll get you. And now he's got a championship because of it. So well done. Congratulations.
Thank you. I appreciate
we're
that.
super excited about that.
I appreciate Robbie for passing up on him. And
big shout out to Robbie.
Welcome to the club, Ryan.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Oh, my goodness. So that's the end of the season. And I kind of asked them that question, but was there anything that kind of jumped out at you this year different in fantasy, or it's something that you noticed that was just anything about this season that kind of jumps out at you?
That the tight ends all sucked this year.
Oh, goodness.
I complained to that, me and Mikey text a lot during the season, but I was just like, the tight ends suck. And it's like the only person who was even halfway decent was Gronk, and even he had a rough go of it. And granted, Brady was out, but, I don't think any of the tight ends hit their value. And it's like, then when I, like with certain people like Zach Ertz, I think I kept him through half the season, and he hadn't done shit, so I let him go. And then, of course, all of a sudden, Carson Wentz was like, you know what? I have this tight end I can pass to, And so, of course, Robbie already had him, so at that point, that was over. And so that basically, if you look at my roster now, I played musical tight end for the rest of the year, trying to figure out who had the best matchup, because, they all were fucking me. It didn't matter which one I had in, Ebron, and then I picked up Vernon Davis. I was like, okay, Jordan Reed's out. Maybe Vernon Davis will get some good, something good going for me. And he got me a whopping 1 point. And then, of course, this week Ebron goes out and he got 12 or something like
that. Yeah.
It's just irritating. But that's one thing I noticed because normally tight ends are pretty – if you have one of the top tier guys,
You're in good shape.
Yeah, they stay that way all year. But
not this
there
year.
was there was nobody that you could say, you know what? Man, that was a good pick when it came to tight end because they all stunk.
So Mikey's looking at his sheet there.
Well, just to his point, the top tight end as like a points per game was Travis Kelce.
Yep.
And that was and he averaged 11 points a game. So
And most of that came at the second half of the season more than the beginning of the season. He really went off to the last 5 or 6 weeks. But
yeah.
Greg Olsen
last week.
Greg Olsen and Gronk and didn't benefit. Well, I did beat Aaron with Greg Olsen, but that was about as good as it got for me in terms of tight ends. But you talk about Kelce 1, Olsen 2, Kyle Rudolph, who went undrafted 3, Delanie Walker was 4, Cameron Brate undrafted, Aaron pulled Jimmy Graham out of a hat, and he did really well this year. Jordan Reed 7th, and he went in the 4th round. So, man, tight ends were abysmal.
See, and I think
abysmal this year.
I think with Delanie Walker, Delanie Walker is underrated. I think doesn't get the credit. Because there is a lot of games I've had I've had Delanie Walker in other leagues where he's put up 20 points, a week or something like that. So, I think he'll start to slowly creep up. Obviously, we'll talk more about that later. But I think he's a tight end that because usually he goes in the later rounds because his name's not Gronk or Jimmy Graham or Kelce. So I think he's kind of an underrated tight end because Mariota likes to go to him, likes to throw to him. So I think that's just something to notice.
Well, even he had kind of a down season even for him. He only had 60 catches and 5 touchdowns, where in years past he's had 70, 80 catches. And so I don't even think he was – I understand your love affair with him, but he's just not one of those guys that – I guess he has to, by default, he's at the top. He's near the top.
Yeah, I just wonder if you'll start seeing, and maybe it was just a down year, I don't know, but, are people going to just, treat tight end like a weight position to,
Maybe. But as soon as we do that, then that's when they explode and jump off the board, just like our whole wide receiver running back scenario where we sung up and down, you got to get wide receivers, because that's how Quayne won it the year before, based on the numbers. And I'll find it in my notes. So we'll kind of move over from tight ends to wide receivers versus running backs. So this season, 4 wide receivers had 10-plus touchdowns, whereas only 7 running backs had 10-plus touchdowns. So the wide receivers versus running backs, while it definitely favors the running backs, that's not kind of how we thought going into it. You talk about 2015. So 4 wide receivers had 200-plus points this year as opposed to 8 running backs that had 200-plus points, including David Johnson had 346 points, which is absurd. Last year, so we talked about the running backs having a rough year. 3 running backs with 200-plus points, and it was 10 wide receivers with 200-plus points. So we can go into next year saying you got to get running backs, or is it just cyclical? It doesn't matter. It's just 1 year running backs are good while the wide receivers struggle. The next year, vice versa. Who knows how it all plays out?
Yeah.
There's no rhyme or reason. I feel.
And who knows? Maybe we'll go back to quarterbacks being drafted. In the first round. You never know. It might be depending on the year. Depending on what, how people feel, how the league goes. I mean, obviously we know it's a passing league, but people still think, well, I can still get a quarterback, obviously in later rounds. Obviously, Mikey, you do, you've done, you always get a quarterback toward the, in later rounds because you get better value, with wide receivers or running back. So it really just depends. I mean, obviously except for Drew Brees and Aaron Rodgers. I mean, obviously Andrew Luck kind of had down years because he had a crappy offensive line that seems to be going around these days in the NFL. But you just never know.
Well, I think it might be like some things especially because now running backs basically serve dual purpose for the most part. Most of them have to be able to catch passes, and they got to be able to run. So you're getting all those touches on the run, and then you're getting the pass. I mean, really, because that's the reason why Aaron's team kicked so much ass. I mean, Those running backs were ridiculous.
Yeah,
he looked like the genius of the draft with that shit. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So,
and when we were talking about who we thought our favorite teams were, there was only a couple of us that thought that Aaron would have a really good chance of winning it all. Todd, including in that category. We talk about things that we said, right, we didn't give when we were listening to the podcast, me and Mikey both went through the 6 podcasts, but we said, who would you think would be in the playoffs or in the championship game? Todd said Aaron, but we never allowed him to finish that sentence. We didn't know who he was going to say against. So I think we cut him off and then decided, well, let's see what we had to think about it.
Todd was right in that statement. Todd said Aaron will get there because of David Johnson, Le'Veon Bell, and Aaron Rodgers.
Yeah, he was absolutely right. So let's do a.
Are you insane? Not containing my smile that I had all these people. I thought I fucked all you guys.
Aaron telling us how incredible his draft was, and it was, and we'll talk about that as we go through. Let's do a quick season wrap up of what happened during the regular season. We're not going to go too far because we want to get into the guys we thought did well and didn't do well, but we talked about Lion Rip strolling through the regular season with a 12-1 record. The only thing that. Me beating Aaron was the only thing I can even hang my hat on this year. I had a really bad season.
Got that right, boy.
Yeah, boy, it was pretty rough. Kilgore Trout finished second at 9-4. Takes it in the backfield, was third at 9-4. How good of a season did Robbie have? Like, we didn't really talk about him much, but if you look at his roster, he's got a really deep roster compared to the rest of us.
He probably had the most underrated draft. Like, look at we beat the hell out of him for that Adrian Peterson pick. But the picks he made after that, man, give the guy credit. He, with picking LeGarrette Blount, Carlos Hyde, Michael Thomas. Yeah. I mean, Robbie did a hell of a job.
It was interesting to kind of go through like just the rosters and the quarterbacks and just in terms of like, man, wow, he really did a good job in terms of how he put his team together, and thus he was the third best team at 9. I tied for a second, but had lower points. Gonzo Cats had a solid season, 8-5. Then the land of mediocre kicked in after that. Clientele in the 5th seed at 5-7-1. Tamales at the 6th seed, 6-7. And of course, those two made the championship match. Then of course, those excited for a high draft pick next season, including myself, Globex Corporation, Notorious CUP finished 8th. I was at 9th. All those teams 5-7-1. Belt Sanders at 10th at 5-8. Butterfingers in 11th with his 4-9 record. And of course, the team that finished dead last by a large margin, really at 3-10. And with his infinity for his Raiders in a league full of Bronco fans, his new name change is going to be quite interesting.
Well, and what was interesting about that, him finishing last, is in the podcast, Eric said, we went over, I think it was a trivia question you had asked that said, where, teams have won and which teams were the worst. You said the 9th spot, nobody ever has a chance.
And so I feel bad for you, G. That's it. You shouldn't even show up to the draft.
Look what happened.
You do not want to be. Who's in the 9th spot this year?
Don't mess with history.
Oh, that's me. So I guess I'm not winning it next year.
Don't mess with history. G, it's not your fault.
Oh, no.
It is your fault. You took Jamal Charles.
Yeah.
It was.
I think, yeah.
All right. So that's kind of how the season finished out. I heard an interesting fantasy football saying on a podcast yesterday and said you have to be good to get in the playoffs, but you have to be lucky to win a championship. Do you feel that same way?
No.
Yeah, it's
Are you sure? Are you sure? I mean, for someone who came in with a losing record, just be happy to be there.
Yeah.
Aaron, you had the best season of almost anyone ever, and you win and he doesn't. Sounds like you have to be a little lucky to me.
No.
I mean, for Aaron, who averaged close to 160 points per game, had by far his worst game of the season in terms of point totals at 109. That's a little unlucky.
Here's what I'll say, and the reason I disagree with it is I worked my butt off on the waiver wire during the playoffs.
You did.
When nobody was paying attention because
I'm not saying there's not.
their seasons were over. I was working it, and I managed to find guys like Robbie Anderson, Cam Meredith in that championship game, Miami the week before, to make my team better in order to advance.
Well, I don't want to say there's no skill. I don't want to say that. But there's also a lot of luck that plays into it, too. Aaron had some really good guys that had bad week. Had that one bad week.
I can agree
Just
with
one
that.
bad week. We saw if he would have made the championship, he would have destroyed any of us, whoever it was. His team went bananas and just because one bad week. I'm not saying that you guys didn't earn it. That's what I'm not trying to say. I'm just saying sometimes there's a lot of luck. Sometimes things just don't go your way, and that's just how it works. That's unfortunate, but yeah.
Story of your season.
My season was. We'll talk about my season later. That's a different story.
Yeah, I got some stuff to throw on there.
Yeah, good. There's a big pile, and I'm underneath it. So, all right, so let's bring you some MHA trivia. So this season, a 6 seed won the championship. That is only the third time that's ever happened. So can you name the first two? Can you remember the other 6 seeds that won the championship? They happened in back-to-back years. I'll give you that.
Back-to-back years.
I just have to believe that Todd is one of them.
6 seed? I don't know.
Todd is not one of them.
I was always the 1 seed, 1 or 2 seed.
That doesn't sound believable.
It's true, Mikey. It was true.
It happened later in the 15 years. So I'll say it happened after 2009.
Was Cup one of them?
CUP was one of them. He was 8-6 as the 6 seed, beating the Belt Sanders, who came in as the 4 seed that season. So was it the year before that happened again, or the year after? Because I said it was back-to-back. So 2012 was when Notorious CUP won with his 8-6 6 seed.
So it was Aaron in 2011, right?
That is correct. Aaron was 7-7, and he went and beat Babish 10-4. Well done, Aaron. I'm glad Babish doesn't have a championship. So the second question of this, since you guys were the first 2 teams to go to the championship with losing records, has there ever been a team? No, I guess I just threw that away, didn't I? So you would have been the first teams to win. My question was, has there ever been a team with a losing record that won the championship? No, but who has the worst record to win a championship?
Worst.
I kind of gave it away.
Let's say, wouldn't it be Aaron?
It would
Because
be
he's
Aaron
7-7.
7-7, yeah.
Yep. The two lowest seeds to get in outside of 5 and 6 was 4 and 6, and that would have been the Notorious CUP. And that it's interesting kind of how it worked at the beginning. The one. So I'm just going to quickly go through this. So in 2002, 1 and 2 seed went to the title. 1 and 3, 3 and 1, 1 and 2, 2 and 1, 1 and 2, 2 and 1, 2 and 5 in 2009, and then 1 and 2, 6 and 2, 6 and 4, 2 and 1, 3 and 4, 3 and 4, and 6 and 5. So you could see the kind of progression of parity go through as it kind of went along, where it seemed like the top 2 teams always won it, or at least were in the conversation, and then finally, like you want to call it the wild card guys or whatever, but so it's kind of just interesting how it's progressed. Like I remember you were kind of talking about it on one of the podcasts where like the first couple of years you had no idea what you were even doing. You were just like, hey, Ryan, you want to be a part of this? Sure. And you pick guys that you like, and so you eventually figured it out. I think that happened with everybody. And that's kind of how it worked. And then when we have the same people in the league every year, too, like for a couple of years we brought in new people every year, especially like at CompUSA people with Yang.
Yeah, I remember that,
And if we had Fook in the league for a year or two. And so once we have a consistent league, I think that's where it kind of like, oh, everybody is really involved. So Not exciting.
I remember the Comp
trivia.
USA draft. I still remember I went Randy Moss and Kerry Collins. Good God Almighty! But
Well,
Sounded good at the time. I
well,
guess.
Randy Moss. I mean,
yeah, he had his
obviously great,
worst
but-
years when he was a Raider. Man,
Yeah,
it was like, yeah.
but Kerry Collins, oy.
Well, I was trying to do that DraftKings stack 'em shit.
Oh,
You know,
okay. All right.
Anything else we want to say about the championship, and whether it be losing teams in there or anything about the playoffs, regular season? We got to jumped out.
The league was just so top heavy.
Yeah,
You-
agreed.
you
Kilgore.
know, Aaron and Kilgore. It just and then
Robbie did a 9-4.
there were so many teams that had losing records. It's just that was what was different about it, I guess.
When you look at their rosters were good. You look at my roster, Todd's roster, can't find a good player on there. And that's just unlucky. You maybe didn't run the waiver wire. The guys you went for didn't do really well.
And I looked this up. Like, when would you figure that out? You had, Aaron, who broke the record for, most points.
Did he? I didn't realize he had the most points.
Yeah, he had the most points,
Wow.
especially in a 13-week season. But then you also had NWA, who had the least amount of points ever in a season since we switched over to the running back scoring, a point for every 10. So, both of those happening in the same year.
Yeah.
Go
Go figure that.
Yeah.
Go figure that. One of the big reasons that a lot of teams couldn't find points was obviously the injuries. I think they were pretty rampant this year, and maybe they're rampant every year. I don't know, but it just seemed like this year. And I'm just going to go through some quick guys here. Obviously, Adrian Peterson is the number 1 overall pick. Gronkowski was injured for a majority of the year. Jamal Charles never made it out of the gates. A.J. Green, Keenan Allen, Doug Martin, Deion Lewis, Eddie Lacy, Thomas Rawls, Alshon Jeffrey, C.J. Anderson, Eric Decker, Danny Woodhead, Sammy Watkins, Matt Jones, Gio Bernard, Tyler Eifert, Kevin White. Such a huge list of guys, and most of those guys are in the first, to second, third, fourth, and there's some guys 5th, 6th, 7th, all the way to 10th. I went as far as 10th, but because after that it's your dart throws.
I
But
forgot Newton. Oh, that was his ego.
no,
Sorry,
he was
That
bad.
doesn't count.
He was bad. He played every game and was bad on his own volition. Well, that's a lot of guys that are on my squad. But I just thought that was interesting that there was a lot of guys. And so when you're out there trying to find waiver wire guys, obviously I tried to make trades to make my team better. And I think that just kind of one of the overlying factors of the overall. Why are you holding your nose like
I had an
yeah, my
itch.
team was
I had an
terrible.
itch.
There's no doubt about that.
I was going to say, I mean, you made, 3 trades? You made 3 trades. That's got to be I'm just thinking, that's probably the most trades you made in one season?
I mean, I don't know. I mean, I'll make trades. I mean, I was trying to.
Yeah,
my boat was sinking, and I wanted to try to salvage it. I had to try something, and I felt like I got the guys I wanted, and guys like Cam Newton, Kelvin Benjamin, Gronkowski. I got Greg Olsen because I thought I needed to upgrade.
Give him credit.
That.
He fleeced you.
Okay, I got one good week out of Will Fuller, okay? And he got me 23 points. So, and Jesse J, that was another. But
yeah, it was interesting because I remember me and Mikey were talking about it, and I said he worked you, and then Allen ended up working him. That's one thing I think ruined this season was giving up Rivers for Cam Newton.
Maybe, but it's not like Rivers was ever that good either. At least he had a couple 40-point games, but he had 4 weeks in a row where he had 30 points or around 30 points. And so for me, I knew that was coming, and I knew if I was going to win a championship, I wasn't going to beat Aaron with Phillip Rivers. So I decided, I thought maybe Cam Newton would figure it out. And I also tried the Kelvin Benjamin because I knew they had a good schedule. And I mean, there was a lot of different reasons. Division gives up a lot of points, and it just never came to that at all.
I'll wait for where you were wrong, where I was right when we talk about Kelvin Benjamin later.
Yes. The board bet. We'll talk about that for sure. But so that's kind of the season wrap up. If there's something that comes up while we're talking, then we could definitely talk about it. But let's kind of get into the MVPs, busts, surprises. We'll kind of start with the busts, and we'll start off with Todd, who kind of stood out as you as a big bust this year.
Well, obviously 2 of them here, and one of them was on my team, Mr. Todd Gurley. Bad offensive line, just couldn't figure it out. I knew they were going to stack the box with 8-man fronts, and yeah, it was just horrible. And obviously, we knew that Rams team this year was just a big dumpster fire, so not too big of a surprise. And the other one, Hopkins, DeAndre Hopkins. Obviously, I guess $72 million doesn't get you a whole lot to throw you the ball. And he just had a down season. Only 128 points for somebody who went in the first round, who was after that trio of wide receivers of Antonio Brown, Odell Beckham Jr., and Julio Jones, and Hopkins just didn't have the season he was probably looking for. People were really high on him.
I think we knew. I know me and Mikey talked about it, and we were worried that because it was the Rams, that he would have less opportunities to be productive. But I didn't think it was going to be this bad. He finished 17th overall amongst running backs. I mean, he had 845 yards and 39 catches, just 6 touchdowns. They had really no other option to give anybody, so we thought that would be helpful in terms of volume, but he was never able to do anything with that volume, which is scary for the. I mean, they're going to have a new head coach next year, so I don't know what happens offensive line wise or whatever. But is he just a bad player, or did he just have a bad team around him?
I think it was a bad team. I think probably.
Well, I think his value in our league was a little inflated to be drafted that high, only because he doesn't catch passes. And
True,
so
but
that's always going to be a problem.
I'd have to look to find this. I have so many notes around here, but I think you said he should have been a first-round pick.
Yeah, Todd, when did you draft him? You drafted him like fifth
or sixth, something like that.
Sixth.
Yeah, I don't know. He's not a guy. I knew he was going to be drafted in the first round. That's why I said that. It just wasn't going to be by me because those guys that don't catch passes, it hurts you in our league, in PPR.
But if he would have had better production when it came to touchdowns, because granted he didn't even get his first touchdown until mid-season anyway, because he just couldn't get anything going, and most of all his touchdowns were at the goal line, and even when they were at the goal line, there was even times he couldn't even get in the end zone to begin with anyway. So I do see your point. The fact, obviously he doesn't catch a lot of passes, but when he's the main back, you think, okay, he's going to get all the carries. It's just like Adrian Peterson.
And he did, but that had more to do with teams stacking the box with everybody throwing him at it. They weren't afraid of the Rams passing game. So
well, yeah.
You know what's coming.
Yeah, I mean, I think the talent's there. There's no question about that, and I think they're right. I mean, who else were they going to use? I mean, your main weapon, if all you just got to just stack the box, and he ain't going to be able to do shit. I mean, because if you look at it, I mean, the year before, he was injured for, the first 4 games, and then after that, I mean, he broke out, and he was looking like great promise. I think, obviously if they can fix the issues with the offensive line and, make their passing game dangerous enough that people will actually worry about it instead of just kind of laying in the cut on them, then, then you'll see it. But, I mean, there's no question the talent is there. So
where do you draft him next year?
Well, it depends. It's going to depend on what people are going to think if Jared Goff's going to be any better next year, or if the Rams go out.
So let's say it's
pick up a weapon.
Let's say it's the same situation as we see now. How far does he fall?
It'd be hard for me to believe that he still wouldn't go like in round 2.
Really, in the second round, for a guy that was averaging like 2.5 yards a carry.
I'm not saying it's me. I'm just telling you what I think.
So you're saying more of our league will take a chance on him in the second round.
Adrian Peterson went first.
Well, that's a little different. Yeah. That's a little different.
Adrian
You're talking
Peterson.
about surefire Hall of Fame to a guy that had like a 10-game stretch.
Right, but I'm going to quote Todd here. Don't get mad.
Here we go.
But how many times did Todd say running backs are not a dime a dozen?
He was right about that, though.
Yeah.
Let's give him that credit. Okay, let's talk about.
It's a first. Todd gets credit.
I have to take these moments in because they don't happen often.
Let's quickly. He mentioned DeAndre Hopkins. That could be in line for one of the busts of the year. For a guy that we talked about how great wide receivers were. He went 10th in our league to Gonzo Cats this year. Was just an incredible player the year before. We thought they got an upgrade at Brock Osweiler. Obviously, that did not pan out. Thank you, John Elway. What do we say about DeAndre Hopkins now and his future value going into next year?
I think it depends who's behind center, to be honest, because, I mean, the Texans have a hell of a situation. You get to pay this guy all kinds of money. basically it shows, I'm sure they're going to give him another shot because they have to. I bet you, they wish they would have took the Elway route and let him walk away. But now they have to give him another chance, a little bit more time to develop him, a little bit more time for him to get even, more familiar with the playbook, get some practice in. So it's going to be him, at least in the beginning. But I wouldn't be surprised to see them grab somebody else just in case, like a decent backup, yeah, whether it's in the draft or whether it's, a free agent. But, I don't see the situation changing. I think he is who he is, but, they got themselves in a situation. But I think it's all about who's behind center because, it just goes to show because people a lot of times will make the argument, oh, well, such and such wouldn't be shit, if it wasn't for this quarterback or, vice versa. But this just goes to show that, it's a tandem deal. There's the few exceptions like Tom Brady who seems to be able to make any receiver look great. But for the most part, it shows it's definitely, chemistry and teamwork and making it work. Hopkins has a lot of talent, but, it didn't pan out this year.
Next year, what do you think, Mikey, about DeAndre Hopkins? He finished 36th this year with 68 catches, 788 yards, and 4 touchdowns. That's about half of what he did last year.
Right.
That's a huge drop.
He definitely is not going to go in the first round like he did this year. But for me, I'm never opposed to taking a guy that's got that type of talent because that just makes him – he's going to be off people's radar. And then for me, it just makes me think he'd be primed for a bounce back.
Sure, buy low type of candidate situation.
Yeah.
And obviously, you just hope that Will Fuller on the other side develops too, so that gives them.
Well, we don't have a keeper league, so you don't have to worry about him next year for you personally, right? No, why are you building up the Will Fuller sweepstakes?
He's grabbing him in his first round pick.
Exactly.
He disappointed you.
I'm just saying it'll just take pressure off because they always double team Hopkins. So that
I don't think that was the problem though.
Well,
I think the problem was Brock Osweiler in that offense not getting him enough targets. I didn't look up the targets for what he did, and maybe I can try to figure that out. But they barely. And there was a game where he threw for like 70 yards, and that means not a lot of targets, or the targets are about 50 feet above his head.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that's got to change. I don't know. I agree with Mikey. He's a little more of a buy low candidate, but kind of on the lower end. Unless something changes and we see this great preseason from Osweiler, I don't know. That was quite disappointing. I figured he would regress from his 1,400 yards and 12 touchdowns, but not by this much.
Well, he had crappy quarterbacks throwing in the ball anyway before.
I think this is a crappier quarterback than Brian Hoyer and Ryan Mallett. And he's making $17 million or $18 million a year. So that's unfortunate for them.
Too bad.
So whatever. Mikey, who do you got for a couple of your butts that stood out this year?
Okay. I have to quote you.
Oh, boy.
One of these.
Where's that mute button at?
We did the After the Draft podcast, and to quote Eric.
I think I know who
he
he's
said,
going with this.
He said, I have the 2 best receivers in the league.
Yeah, I sure did. and honestly, you guys agreed with me, too. It's not like you guys, oh, you're crazy, Eric. You guys are like, yeah, you're actually right.
As it turned out, I had the 2 best receivers in the league.
This is true.
But Eric said he did, and one of the main reasons he did was because he had Brandon Marshall. And so, man, Eric was so happy. Every league he was going in, got to have Brandon Marshall. I love Brandon Marshall. Got to have him. Oh, my God. What a horrible season.
You can't argue with the logic. I'm not going to lie. If he wouldn't have grabbed, I was close to grabbing him. He just ended up in a fuck situation. Fitzgerald looked like shit. And then obviously, I can't remember his name. That's how much shit he looks like. But the backup, he really
Smith.
ain't shit. Yeah, Geno Smith. And then who we got going now?
Bryce Petty.
There you go, Bryce Petty. Bryce Petty doesn't even act like Brandon Marshall exists.
I think he had something like 14 points in his last 3 weeks. Like, it's just, he was so bad. So bad.
Yeah. He finished 48th amongst wide receivers, 59 catches, 491 yards, 3 touchdowns, and a second-round pick. Yeah, it was devastating in every league that I had him. And I didn't win a championship in the Joe Vaccarelli league because he was so bad. In that league, I traded Brandon Marshall for Ezekiel Elliott in a keeper league because I was like, well, I have enough talent to win a championship now. I'm going to go get Brandon Marshall. And obviously that didn't work out by any stretch. So, the logic, right. It made sense. It looked like it made sense on paper. I traded him. That's how far from grace he fell in my world. That didn't work out either. But Yeah,
I mean,
that was a
who
terrible
could have
bust.
predicted that Fitzgerald would suck this bad? And
Yeah.
that's what really, because, I mean, if he would have played like he did last year, you'd be, we'd be having a totally different conversation, because the year before, I mean, Marshall was getting targeted. It was basically like he had Jay Cutler in New York, because, Jay Cutler loved Brandon Marshall, throwing it to him every time. It was basically the same thing when Fitzgerald was playing good.
Yeah,
So
that's true.
And Decker went down
Or
with an injury.
Fitzpatrick, my fault. I don't want to call him Fitzgerald. But they're both Irish names.
I don't know. I don't know how much Decker going down hurt them in that situation. I think he still would have been bad even if Decker was there. But Brandon Marshall has been a very productive wide receiver. This has definitely been one of his worst. If I haven't seen if it's his worst ever, but
It's got to be close.
that was
Yeah.
pretty bad. Mikey, anybody else that you had?
Yeah, and I don't mean to pick on you, but
No, do it.
Cam Newton.
Yeah.
Isn't the other one, he was actually, originally Allen's pick, and there was so much hype surrounding him. He won the MVP, took his team to the Super Bowl last year, but
Not to mention, I had him as my number one overall quarterback.
couldn't
Yeah,
sustain
yeah.
it. I mean, he didn't even average 40 points a game, in fantasy. He was terrible.
He was
terrible.
more than terrible. He was
Yeah.
more than terrible.
It was awful.
Because he was bitching about all the hits he was getting to the referee, so his mind was somewhere
I don't
else.
know what happened. What happened with that team? I mean, we can lump Kelvin Benjamin into it as well, but what happened to that team? Does anybody know?
I think
Offensive line was not very good
well,
this year.
no, I think things changed for them. Like, a really big part of their team was Josh Norman. I actually think he was one of the leaders on that team, and I think when they got rid of him, it changed a lot. I know you're making that face, but
Have
I
you heard Josh Norman talk? I would not want that man leading me into battle.
I think it was big though for him.
I agree. He was a really good player, and that probably hurt some of the dynamics of the defense.
So how bad?
What's that got to
defense
do
was.
with Cam Newton being terrible offensively?
Well, I think that I think they went away from what worked, partially because he won the MVP. Like they had used him to pass a lot more this year, which that's not how they were winning games. They were winning games by him running, Jonathan Stewart.
He definitely
running.
stopped running.
That team was a running team, and with Benjamin coming back, they're like, oh, okay, well now we can be more of a passing team, and it didn't work.
No, I mean we watched a lot of Cam Newton, and I traded him low. I was hoping to buy low on him because we mentioned I didn't feel like I had good enough parts, but he would overthrow guys. There was no touch on his passing. He obviously never ran.
Bad body language.
Yeah, I mean he just kind of had this. He didn't have the fun. Everything's working well for me demeanor as he did last year, as opposed to this year where it just seems like he was sullen all the time, and maybe he felt like he had to carry the team because the offensive line wasn't that great. But he was definitely not the same. That offense was not the same.
Didn't see a lot of dabbing this year.
No,
Yeah.
no, there was no.
There was
dabbing.
There was a lot of weird hats.
Yes, a lot of weird hats. I mean
Yeah,
that's what ended up throwing me. Go ahead.
Yeah, I guess so. Just in conclusion, if you say bust, lemon heads.
Yeah, there's a lot of busts. There's a lot of busts. Yeah. Ryan, was there any busts that kind of jumped out at you, or guys that didn't perform up to par that kind of stood out to you?
Well, I mean, Todd already mentioned one of them, because I remember I actually had him as one of my dudes who I thought was going to have a great year was Todd Gurley. I remember I had him as my when we had the running back show or whatever.
Oh, yeah.
And you had us to pick one that was going to do great, one that was going to be a bust, and then, the sleeper. I was right about the sleeper, and I was dead wrong about So, I mean, he definitely stands out. I was thinking about that all year, because I was like, oh, poor Todd. He probably picked him strictly off of my recommendation. No,
And he won the championship, so take that irony for what it's worth.
Obviously, Brandon Marshall's another one that had popped in my head. There was a lot of people this year that, definitely surprised as far as, what you thought you were going to get. Cam Newton. I mean, you guys named all the huge ones.
Those are definitely the bigger ones. I have a couple other ones as well. Allen Robinson was a guy that in another situation where you thought you were getting the same offense that you did the previous year with Blake Bortles. And we figured, if anything, we thought, and I will say I was right about this, but I was thinking that the thing that made the Jags offensively incredible was that they were playing from behind and they had to throw.
Right.
I mean, a lot of those touchdowns came in the fourth quarter. And so everybody else was saying, well, their defense is better. They won't have to throw as much. I was right in the fact I don't think their defense is going to be that good this year. But even then, Blake Bortles, it was more Blake Bortles' regression that hurt Allen Hurns, Julius Thomas, and, of course, Allen Robinson, who ended up finishing 30th amongst wide receivers, 59 receptions, 654 yards, 6 touchdowns. Obviously, Quayne took him to the championship last year. He took him with a second-round pick on the turn. And just incredible how bad every week. He kind of picked it up a little late in the year. But that was another guy that kind of fell from grace. Yeah. And not all of his fault. But I hadn't seen a lot of Jags games in terms of he was dropping balls or wasn't running routes. But I've heard more about Blake Bortles and his terrible season. And did not pan out.
I mean, I think we could add him to the list. Blake Bortles himself.
Yeah.
Even, and I kind of hesitate, but, maybe even Jarvis Landry. I know I would have expected a lot more from him.
Yeah. Yeah, that was another guy that didn't play too well this year.
Yeah.
Give Eric credit on that. He wasn't buying the Jags.
No. Or the Broncos. I mean, you could talk about DT and Emmanuel Sanders as well, but we're not going to go into that too much. I'll say Doug Martin also, but one that kind of gets overlooked a little bit was Julio Jones. And that was one of the things that Mikey was right on because he initially said in his mock draft he would take Julio over Odell. In the next podcast, he actually changed his mind. In the draft, he had the option. He took Odell, and Julio finished 12th amongst wide receivers, 76 despite Matt Ryan being an MVP candidate.
Yeah.
Only had 76 receptions. He did have 1,300 yards, which is incredible, but only 5 touchdowns after having 14 or something the year before.
Now, I will say, in fairness to Julio, because the statistic, I liked instead of the total points, I like to look at the average that they get per game.
Yeah, per week.
So
sure.
the injury, he missed a couple games because of it. If you're looking at average, then Julio was actually 6th.
Okay.
Among wide
but
receivers.
Not first or second
Right.
or third, which is where the value.
Right.
And you could also say, I could give you, he had, what did he have total points? 100, well, no, that's his targets. For Julio Jones, golly, I just lost him on here. But a good portion of his points came in that 300-yard game.
Yeah.
So, depending on how that dips his average, he had 165 total points for the season. But he had a game where he had 1. He had a game where he had 3. He had a game where he had 4. A game where he had 5. And then it looks like he's missed 2 games this season. And he had a game that had 7 and 5. And he had a couple of good games. That was 12, 16, 19, 17, 19. He had 33. That was a 300-yard game. 16 and 13. So even if you talk about his playoff run, okay, he was injured for 2 of those games, a 5-point game and a 7-point game.
Yeah, I think a lot of that was byproduct of Atlanta's run game being so much better.
Yeah.
And Matt Ryan definitely was spreading the ball around a little bit more too. Mohamed Sanu, Tyler Gabriel, and so forth. So I think too that predicated some of his points total going down. But
so we'll kind of transition into the surprises. Matt Ryan was one of my surprises just because we were talking about him. He ended up finishing 3rd in total points, 680 points, 32 touchdowns, 7 picks, 7 times. He had 50-plus points. He also had a 60-point game and a 71-point game. So just a phenomenal season for a guy. If I can find, he ended up getting drafted 14th round by Todd over there. So another thing that went right for Todd. Just didn't show up.
Drafted him earlier.
No, that's exactly what you wanted. If you knew that he was going to be great and you pick better guys with those guys ahead of him. Todd, you're still not understanding how this draft thing works, kid. Come on,
I know,
pay
but
attention.
obviously I picked Carson Palmer over Matt Ryan.
Yeah, that didn't work out. We'll talk about what you did wrong later.
Yeah, right.
But yeah, Matt Ryan,
had a good season.
for a guy who last season finished, I believe, like 14th or 15th overall, what a season he's had, despite not having Julio or putting up the big stats. He's in the MVP conversation with Brady and Rodgers. So
Absolutely. I'd say, another big surprise, maybe the biggest to me, was Melvin Gordon.
For sure.
I'd say, he was that guy that if you grabbed him, it was kind of like, all right, well, he's the best running back. I could take it the spot that I'm at kind of guy. Nobody really was like, you know what, I'm going out and I'm grabbing Melvin Gordon.
We hated Melvin Gordon.
What I mean?
Like, he had 0 touchdowns last year. He came in with an injury. Danny Woodhead was obviously the guy we were talking about. We even talked about it on the podcast. We're like, no, we would have drafted him at some point, but we didn't have him anywhere close. He ends up finishing 7th with 219 points. Did he get injured late? and the CUP kind of fell off the map because that's the gentleman who ended up drafting him. But for going from almost nothing to something in 1 year, that's a pretty big jump. I mean, he was given the opportunity when Woodhead went down, and he ran with it. He had a fantastic season.
Absolutely.
Yep, Carlos Hyde was a big one for me.
Yeah,
even just considering how bad San Francisco was, and they were down all the time, and so for a running back to still be able to do what he did throughout the year,
Robbie's team, no less.
Right. I mean, that was pretty amazing to me. He didn't have a good year when he was on Todd's team last year, and he's been pretty consistent all season.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, obviously I had that one good game, on a Monday night game, but after that, yeah, kind of went down after that. But yeah, this year he's been, because obviously, let's face it, who were those weapons on that San Francisco team? Not a whole lot. So
not a lot of weapons here now, really. But I mean, Hyde ends up finishing with 988 yards, rushing 6 touchdowns, 27 catches. Also had 3 touchdowns on the receiving end as well. So an offense that seemed pretty inept. I guess they kind of got going with Colin Kaepernick, which is a name I'll scream 3 points in a game. Kaepernick. Anyway, that's another one where I just knew it wasn't my season.
He was taking a knee that week.
I don't know what he was. Yeah, he wasn't playing. I just remember I was on the plane coming back from Texas, looking at my phone. Third quarter, he just got 3 points. How's that even possible for a quarterback? That's impossible. And then they pull. Anyway. Michael Thomas is another guy that kind of jumped off. He ended up having 82 catches. Yeah. Another Robbie guy. 8 touchdowns. So for someone who had Brandon Cooks, I'm sure that was frustrating to watch. But he kind of came out of nowhere.
You remember when you said in the post-draft that you said, I guarantee you Willie Snead will be better than Michael Thomas. Why are people buying into Michael Thomas?
Yeah. I mean, I don't remember that, but I mean, it's definitely wrong. Michael Thomas ended up pulling in favor. Jordan Howard was another guy. He ended up finishing 9th. He's one of the few things I've gotten right this season. And I actually drafted him, dropped him, and then once I made the trade with Todd, I picked him back up. But he was pretty good, finishing close to. He had over 1,000 yards. Tyreek Hill was another guy that surprised us this year.
Oh yeah,
finishing 13th among receivers. Now he only had 56 catches. But he had 6 touchdowns, and he had a couple of return touchdowns.
Saw that big play potential with him, that speed.
So how do we view Tyreek Hill going next year? Do we kind of see? I mean, it is hard to get return points, and then relying on that and drafting for that. Now, I don't know, for 56 receptions, I mean, none of us are scared of Jeremy Maclin, another guy I got wrong. But anybody, where do you think Tyreek Hill goes next year?
I don't know. He's going to be the enigma because you don't know. He's not. It's not like he's a consistent receiving threat. He gets a lot of his points off of runs too. He just has such a game breaking ability. I don't know. I honestly I don't know where to take him.
Unless they put him full time as a wide receiver, it's going to be tough.
So you're not drafting him amongst the Julio Jones, the Marius Thomas, Emmanuel Sanders, the Amari Coopers?
I mean, he's definitely second half of draft action for him. I mean,
those are the guys that he beat in the points. That's on. I mean, that's just interesting to think that you see his name amongst those types of guys.
Well, absolutely. I mean, because at the beginning of the season when we did the draft, nobody was rushing to grab, Tyreek Hill. So, I mean.
The last one I'll say about surprises is Jordy Nelson finishing second amongst points. Now, I was never right about anything this year, but I didn't think he was going to be that good. I mean, I had him, I don't know, my top 10 wide receivers, 11 or 12. For someone to put up 14 touchdowns, 91 receptions, close to 1,200 yards, coming off a season where he was injured.
And he started slow at the beginning of the year. He kind of started slow.
Kind of exploded more in the second half, so I thought that was kind of interesting. So let's go into the MVPs. I guess give me one or two guys.
Why do we even need to discuss it? There's only one guy it should be. David Johnson. It has to be.
I said Ezekiel Elliott.
No, it can't be. It has to be David Johnson.
Ryan, you want to split the decision here?
I mean, it's hard to argue with what he's saying. I mean, he's the only guy I think consistently 20 points every week, at least. Did he even have a week where he didn't get 20 points?
I'll look that up. But, I mean, you're right. I mean, 346 points.
Yeah.
That is a ton of points. So 20 points, 11, 24, 12, 31, 33, 21, 13, 24, 31, 24, 33, 15, 23, 31, over 20 touchdowns. I mean, I don't know if you go.
Yeah, I mean,
anybody
you
better
can't
than that.
argue with it, and, you know, you got to give Aaron a lot of credit because, you know, I know a lot of people, including myself. I mean, I knew he was going to go high, but when he took him that early, you know, I was just like, that's a little bit early for a dude who we don't really know what he's got because he didn't really turn it on until the second half of last season.
I think Aaron needs the mic on this one.
So if Aaron wants to talk about his David Johnson.
Talk about why
We
David
know what
Johnson
he's going to say.
is the MVP.
He's going to talk about he passed the effing eye test. He said it like
Yeah,
four
no,
times in a row.
I said that last year. I said that all I had to do was see him run one play last year, and that was it. I knew it was like, all right, that guy's a star. That's it. I could see it on one play. It took one play, like he took a screen like to the house, like I think it was midway through the season last year, and I was like, you can see it. You see if a guy has it or he doesn't, and I was like, oh, he's gonna be good. That's tasty. I knew that's who I was going at in that spot if he was available, unless like Antonio Brown fell down there, which I didn't think was going to happen.
So should our MVP go to the best fantasy player or the best fantasy player on the championship team?
No, best fantasy player.
It should be best fantasy player.
Absolutely.
So let me ask you this then: is he the number one overall pick next year?
I think he has to be.
I think
Brian?
it'd be hard to argue against it. We'll say that because, like I said, the only reason I was a little hesitant on him is because he didn't turn it on really until he got his. And granted, it's all about opportunities. But the season before, it wasn't until like those last 4 games where we really seen him like kind of turn it on.
They were juicing Chris Johnson,
right? You know, and so
they were squeezing the last bit of that career that they could last year, and they did. He had a pretty good year. I had him on my team too. That's why I saw so much of David Johnson.
You know, and so he made the right move. And with those kind of fantasy points, you'd be hard-pressed not to. You know, and as we know, with this shit, it always goes through cycles. It used to be it was quarterbacks. Then, you know, quarterbacks, running backs, especially in our league because we're a quarterback-heavy type league. And then, you know, receivers, obviously. But, I mean, when there's a guy that's going to get you – I mean, you're going to see Le'Veon Bell right there, too. Talk about another dude that's been a monster.
Yeah.
You know, another thing that makes this dude look like a fucking genius. You know what I'm saying? I mean, honestly, it does. You know,
So what you're saying is you're willing to cut the trophy in half and give part of it to Aaron?
Well, no.
That's not even genius. I was Le'Veon Bell that round that he was available. That's kind of where I figured he'd fall to and no farther. And I was just waiting to see what Mikey did. Me and Mikey had the same 2 picks in mind. and once it got past, I don't know who was in front of Mikey, but it got to
It was me in front of Mikey.
Was it?
Yeah.
I only had 2 people I wanted to pick that round that I thought I would get, and that was Mike Evans and Le'Veon Bell. That's the only 2 people I was thinking about. And I never, ever, the guys that I want to draft never get to me, ever. They never, and they finally did, and I was like, all right, I'll at least get one. So it was just like whoever Mikey took, and Mike Evans had a good year too.
Yeah,
so.
Granted, I grabbed McCoy that round, so it didn't work out bad for me.
So fuck
but
you on that one too. Anyway. So it actually did work out for you. It actually did work out for you because he's the one that beat me.
So pretty consensus then.
Yeah.
Anybody else that kind of jumps out the page at you? I mean, is that it? Is that the end of MVP talk? Is David Johnson? Let's move on.
For me, it is. Yeah.
All right. Well, let's keep going. Aaron, I mean, while we have you on the mic, do you want to say anything about your season? I mean, for the guy who broke the record for most points in a season, didn't win the championship. He had 1 bad week in all of the weeks.
That was sad. That's all I'll say.
Well, I mean, you said before that you don't think you'll ever have a team like that.
I'd be hard pressed. I think anybody would be hard pressed to have those kind of running backs on one team ever again, honestly. And I know it's going to be hard pressed for me too, but that was tough. We should go back in time and change things because I was close to pulling the trigger on Ty Montgomery, but I didn't just because the whole reason that I picked up Sammy Watkins like in October after someone put him on the waiver wire, the whole reason I picked him up was for that one date against Cleveland. I was like going through all his like injury information all year long. And they're like, well, he'll still probably be back in December. I was like, you know. So I looked at the schedule, and it was like, oh, Cleveland date in the playoffs. And by October, I was like, I'm going to be in the playoffs. I have to plan for the playoffs right now. By October, that's kind of where my mind was at, and I was like, oh, that's a juicy date. So the whole reason I picked him up was for that Cleveland date, and he gets me 1 point.
Yeah, I had him in DraftKings. He banged me real good in that one too.
That's the entire point of holding on to him and stashing him for the waiver wire, stashing him on my team that year was just for that one playoff game. So that's why I didn't put Ty Montgomery in. I was like, the whole reason you picked him up was for this one game. Play him. Everyone else was saying, "Oh, this is Sammy Watkins' day. He's going to come through and do his thing." And he shit all over the place and killed my team. So that's why I hate the Buffalo Bills and Rex Ryan and anybody else associated with that organization.
Well, you don't have to worry about Rex anymore.
Yeah.
Or his brother. They fired them both.
I knew he was going to get fired.
So that's a good transition. I think he gave us a lot what was right with his team, and he gave us what was wrong. The very little small minutiae that cost him his championship, what went wrong. But let's kind of get into that. What went right? What went wrong? Anybody could chime in.
Everything went right for me besides that.
Besides that.
Everything else went right for me. Like I said, that's a 1 in a million season. You don't get those very often, so it's pretty sad that I didn't win. It makes me cry at night sometimes, but it happens.
Well, we're sorry it didn't work out for you.
Here you go, Tidy.
All right, so let's just start with Mikey here. Some things you were right about.
Well, let's start about me and your prop bet. Okay.
Yeah.
So
that was one I was wrong.
Yeah, the bet was
By far.
total fantasy points at the end of the season.
Correct.
I took T.Y. Hilton. Eric took Kelvin Benjamin. Now, all along, I knew I was going to be right about this. T.Y. Hilton finished with 184.
Correct.
Kelvin Benjamin, 126.
Ooh.
So it wasn't close.
No, it was not. And we kind of talked about the whole Carolina shit in the bed, and I didn't expect that. I remember I gave you that really good stat about him and Odell in terms of the first season and the type of numbers they put up, and I know he was out for that next year, but I thought he could come back and be that number one guy amongst those terrible wide receivers in terms of Ted Ginn and Corey Brown. And for what he did in his rookie year was pretty incomparable. And I think that's where it's just going to stand for him in his career. So that's definitely something that you were right about. Congratulations.
T.Y. Hilton, top 10 receiver.
Congratulations on T.Y. Hilton. What else were you right about?
I ended up being right about David Carr.
Yes, I have that on your Carr sleeper quarter. That was your sleeper quarterback.
Yeah, David Carr. He was,
finished 5th overall in terms of quarterbacks.
Yeah, possible, real life MVP candidate. I was somebody that I really liked. I was definitely right on him. Some of the other things, Bilal Powell, he came along. He was another guy that I had, as sleeper candidate. He started off slow, but, really came along towards the end and was really good.
Yeah, he finished in the top 20, I believe, in points. I don't have that number in front of me, but yeah.
Ezekiel Elliott, he was the other big one.
That was your love. Yeah.
That was my love. And for every reason that I said, good offensive line, Dallas being a time of possession team. I couldn't have seen the Dak Prescott thing at that point. But, yeah, Ezekiel Elliott was, top 3 running back during the season. So, yeah, I'm pretty good at this stuff.
Yeah, and your love wide receiver was Mike Evans, and he finished 3rd overall.
There you go. Listen to me more often. You'll be more successful.
Things Mikey was wrong about. Said Rodgers was overrated point per completion quarterback.
I did.
He finished 2nd overall.
I was wrong. But on the other hand, I was right about who was the number 1. So.
Yep. You also said that Kirk Cousins was Nick Foles.
No, I said I was worried. I didn't say he was.
You said it twice.
I didn't say he was. I said it was a concern. I said I wasn't sure about him.
One thing I also noticed that you said you weren't buying into Crabtree.
Yeah.
Crabtree was
100% wrong on that
7th overall.
100% wrong on that one. I'll take that.
And that'll be one of the things I was right about. Golden Tate you were wrong about, but we also mentioned that on that first quarter podcast.
Golden Tate.
He started coming along, though.
He did end up with 85 catches, but when you said, I guarantee you'll have 100 catches this year.
Hey, he can still get 15 catches in Week 17.
No, because he didn't do shit last week, and he screwed me in another league. But 3 touchdowns. Travis Benjamin was your sleeper wide receiver. He finished 59th in wide receivers.
Yeah, and the opportunity was there when Keenan Allen got hurt even more so. But it's funny. It actually ended up being Tyrell Williams instead of Travis Benjamin.
Instead of the other guy, for sure.
Because when half of the Chargers wide receiver core goes down, of course.
So you guys want to go through Todd right now?
We just start off with
Okay, well, with Todd, here's the other prop bet.
Uh-oh.
So the other prop bet was Todd and Ryan. Okay?
Oh, yeah.
Ryan said that Lamar Miller would have more points than Jeremy Langford, which to all of us, me, Eric, and Ryan, that was like an obvious, like that was going to happen. And I think I even said in the podcast that Lamar Miller would have double. I was wrong. He had triple. so Lamar Miller had 171. And
Jeremy Langford probably had, 59?
You're close.
That's funny because I was just before you brought that up, I
51.
was going to say, let's bring up Jeremy Langford.
51. So Todd, talk about Jeremy Langford.
Yeah, Jeremy Langford can go fuck himself.
Yep, that didn't work out for you.
So much promise. Obviously, John Fox was like, "Oh, this is gonna be a great running back. Runs, catches, everything." And yeah, that lasted about 5 seconds. So yeah,
I will give him a little bit of credit though. He did say he's going to be better than Jamal Charles, and I think he got that right.
Well,
That was one of the things I had with Ty is Jamal Charles. Mikey said, and I quote, "You're insane," is what he said. Because he had Jamal Charles 29th overall. And we all thought that, honestly. But, Jamal Charles never made it out, even of the gate.
No.
So congratulations on that. You knew.
That one you didn't have to take a rocket science to figure that one out. All the other seasons he's had injuries. It's just you don't want to see that to a running back.
Did you have anything else that you were right about? That's all I had was. I had some other stuff. We talked about him already.
The way my season went, I don't think right is in my vocabulary. Probably the only thing was right about was the Matt Ryan pick. Probably knowing how much they throw in that offense and getting where I got him. That's probably the only thing I was right about that kept me afloat. Said probably should have played him earlier, but I didn't. So
here's your chance on Carson Palmer. Number 2 overall was your quote.
Ooh.
And he didn't finish anywhere near number 2. In fact, Carson Palmer finished 17th behind Jameis Winston and Andy Dalton.
Dear God.
Now,
Okay.
now you don't even have to explain it, but I want you to understand why he shouldn't have been number 2. We all in this podcast gave you a reason why he shouldn't have been, more than one reason why he shouldn't have been number 2. But do you understand why we were right?
Yes. The fact is because of David Johnson and the fact that offensive line was garbage too a little bit because it
wasn't as good as last year. That was the big thing for them is that their offensive line was really good last year, and their entire offense struggled because of it this year.
Only one probably only good wide receiver on there, the old man Larry Fitzgerald, and obviously Aaron knows about that. But other than that, it was just a crapshoot, and he just.
I tried to tell you he had his best season when he was like age 37. Like that it wasn't going to continue. It wasn't sustainable. He's old.
I understand that he's old, but I was basing it off just the fact of how explosive that offense was, and
it's okay, Todd. It's okay. The next time when the majority is telling you that it's one thing if we're split, but if the whole team is telling you, probably should listen. So some other things. Matt Jones, I know you were your sleeper running back. He finished 52nd overall. And boy, that was just that's just a bad player.
It just was because he kept fumbling the ball.
That's a bad player.
Picked up Fat Rob. Obviously, he kind of helped me.
You hated Frank Gore. Frank Gore was a top 15 running back this year. So that's pretty good. Deion Lewis, obviously, one of the best quotes was that I'm going to hit a home run with Deion Lewis this year. And even on the broadcast, I laughed my ass off. Whoops. He was injured, but
whoops.
You should have known better. So that's Todd. I have just a couple with Ryan. Obviously, Jay Ajayi was his moneymaker.
Players,
it was something that he ended up picking up off free agency.
Absolutely.
And it ended up working, obviously, in the championship game as well. For him, Jay Ajayi finished 11th at 187 points. He was a free agent pickup. The only other thing that I saw was he said that Fitzpatrick would have a good season, so he was on my boat with that. His hate running back was Devonta Freeman, and Freeman ended up doing pretty well, finishing 6th overall.
Yeah, I was right from the standpoint where I said he wasn't going to do as well as he did this previous season, but
Correct.
he still did pretty damn good.
And that was one of the things I got right was I thought Tevin Coleman would help him be productive as opposed to him falling off the map with Tevin Coleman taking a majority of the carries. So that's one of the few things. I didn't have a lot. I will say I was right about Mr. Wallace from Baltimore, Mike Wallace. I said if he was ever going to have a decent season, maybe it wasn't a great season, but if he was ever going to be productive, it would be Joe Flacco who likes to throw it deep. And Mikey's smiling. Go ahead.
Here we go with the next
I just have a couple more quotes
Okay.
from Eric Lansing.
Okay.
So this one was before the draft. Eric says, I really believe this year I'm going to have my best draft. That didn't happen. We heard the one about having the 2 best receivers in the league. The other thing he said was, Jeremy Maclin is an amazing flex player.
Yeah.
Not so much.
Not so much. No.
Oh, and he loves Gio Bernard. Okay.
Well,
That's all I got.
Come on.
He was doing well until he got hurt.
Yeah.
I'll give you Jeremy Maclin. So
Kidding me, Bernard? That's gonna be a Lemonhead lifer right there.
Other things. Eric said Cam was going to be the best quarterback.
yeah, I was wrong on him. I was wrong on Phillip Rivers. He ended up finishing 11th overall.
Yeah.
I had him in 5.
Yeah, remember when I said you'll like Phillip Rivers for the first couple weeks, but by midseason you'll get tired of him?
Yeah. Well, I traded him before it even got to midseason.
Yeah.
So
You got tired of him?
I also hated LaShawn McCoy.
Yeah.
I vehemently said I thought he was going to have a terrible season. He had too much tread on the tires. He had all these other running backs in front of him. Or not in front of him, but next to him with Carlos Williams, and obviously Reggie Bush was there, and Mike Gillislee was there. So I figured they would save him more for the playoff run, and boy, that dude ran wild this year.
Bam!
Bam, in my face. In my face. But, my love running back was Mark Ingram, and he was fine. He finished 10th. Obviously, he could have had a better season, but other than that, right on Crabtree. We kind of mentioned that already. Anything else that we want to talk about? I mean, we can talk about where we're I think that's all I really have in terms of all these notes. Anybody want to chime in and say anything before I guess we kind of
Yeah, I
exit?
want to toot my own horn for just a second.
Yeah, we knew that was coming.
Where's the mute button, Eric? Where's the mute button?
I mean, just looking through because I made the championship game again, and we're 15 years in. And so I want you guys to bask in what I've managed to do.
Here it comes.
Is that better? Can you guys hear him right now?
Would you believe that in 11 out of the 15 seasons, the Hot Tamales have finished 4th or better?
That's pretty
In
good, I
11
guess.
out of 15.
That's all right.
Yeah, that's pretty good. I'm not going to front. That's pretty good, man.
That's good, Mikey.
It is really tough living with the Renault family.
The other
For
thing,
sure.
the other thing, and we mentioned it before the podcast, is things can be so much easier for teams. Tom Brady and Peyton Manning have been the quarterback of 9 out of our 15 champions. So
That's impressive.
Yeah.
just right there, yeah. Ryan had Tom Brady, and this was the second year in a row the team that had Tom Brady won, and the 4th time that the team that had Tom Brady won. So,
Yeah, and interestingly enough, the last time I was in the championship game, I had Peyton Manning, even though it was kind of his fault I lost. But,
Yeah.
you know.
so there's definitely some worth to drafting those guys. Not Manning anymore, but definitely, Tom Brady.
Yeah, I mean that's. I mean, it just shows how really good they are in reality and fantasy. So, obviously, most of us have obviously won a championship with either with Peyton Manning or Tom Brady. Mikey, you won a championship with Peyton Manning, right? Or have you ever won a championship with Peyton Manning?
Yeah, I have. Those guys, they're not a dime a dozen, Todd.
Oh my gosh! Now I really see how that is annoying.
Yeah, try living with it. Gotta get those noise canceling headphones to be able to drown all these folks out.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's the season in a nutshell. Yeah, interesting. It was a fun season. Lots of injuries. It kind of went the opposite in terms of you really need to get wide receiver heavy. You should go to running back heavy, at least for this season. We'll see how our thoughts kind of go into next year. And Ryan comes out, we have a brand new champion.
Absolutely. Really, really excited. It's been a long time. I almost feel like, probably how those players has been in the league for a long ass time, and it just eludes you and eludes you and eludes you, and then you finally, get a grasp it. And I can't wait, man. I can't wait till you guys say, "Hey, man, your trophy's ready." Shit's gonna be sitting in my living room, man, and you better believe it. The draft is gonna be sitting on my damn table.
Good. It should.
That's what you got to do. You got to.
And I'll have on, like I already told you guys off the thing, I'm going to have my LaShawn McCoy jersey on at the draft. Much respect. That's right.
There you go.
So just quickly, the draft order for next year will be NWA first, Butterfinger second, Belt Sanders third, Lemonheads fourth, CUP fifth, Globex and the sixth spot, and then Robbie, Gonzo Cats, Kilgore, Aaron, Mikey, and then Ryan. So I'm screwed because as the ninth, apparently I guess that means the only team, or it just has to motivate me to be better. I honestly thought I would have not the best draft, but I'd have my best draft because I did a lot of homework for the podcasts. I don't like sound like an idiot on the radio, so I did as much research as I could, and I thought it just sometimes just doesn't work out. It doesn't work out, but that's all I have to say about that.
Like you said, some of it is luck.
Yeah.
And what players you draft and where you get them, and it's just
Some is luck. The other part's listening to my part of the podcast.
That's funny, man. I never knew you to be so cocky. Now, look, I'm learning stuff,
Hey,
man.
11
Normally, you're Captain Humble Pie.
11 out of 15 is a pattern.
Well, so that's going to do it for this podcast. Thanks, guys. It was a lot of fun to be able to do this. We didn't do the newsletter as we've done in years past, but this was a lot of fun, too, and I think a lot of the rest of the owners enjoyed it, especially for those who actually went on. Like Quayne kind of came on and helped out. Aaron came on, and then obviously Ryan a couple times. So for Todd Diamond, Aaron Renault, Mikey Renault, Ryan Castro, Eric Lansing, we'll see you next year, MHA owners. Watch out, number 9.